G'day. Today I finished the gaff blocks, put the slots in, drilled and tapped, so they're all ready for use, and in fact I even got to use them. In the previous clip I talked about how you can correct the angles if they're not quite right. Now I'm machining a second set. It's a slightly larger set, and you'll probably see that and the smaller set interchangeably in this video. But what I've got here is just a little bit of shim, just jacking that up just a smidge to give me the right angle. Once I've got this one at the right angle, I can then swap those two over, take the shim out, and because of the geometry, I'll be right. Here we are ready for the next stage of operations. One of the features of these blocks is they have a slot on either side for attaching to its pair. So I've set this up, same basic setup as before. I've put a block under here just to lift this up because I'm going to come in with a T-slot cutter and relieve the back of that slot, so I've got a clean surface for the nut to bolt on. That needs to be parallel. I've used my spirit level here just to get that parallel to the mill table. It doesn't have to be horribly parallel, it's just that you want those slots to be square. This is my basic setup for cutting the slots. So basically I've worked out where the centre is. I've got a 1/2 inch cutter in there, and I'll just bring that in, bring it over, do the same thing, and then I'll use my T-slot cutter to do the underside of the cut to give me a nice flat surface like that I can be then clamping on. The counter bore is just necessary for being able to get a flat surface for these bolts to bolt onto. That's just a bit of studding with a couple of tie down nuts, so nothing special there, but that just gives a nice firm surface to tie to. One thing when using the T-slot cutter as a counter bore there, I've had to just machine that shank down just a little bit. That's a 1/2 inch shank, this is a 1/2 inch slot, and so it was rubbing a little bit. So I've machined that down by about 1 millimetre. It's just something you'll have to do. This poor cutter, unfortunately, because it's cutting through the skin of the casting, it's probably going to have a tough time, but I'm hoping it'll last for all the castings I've got to do. When I'm pocketing out for the T-nuts, I want to try and get the pockets on either side around about the same height. So the way I'm doing that at the moment to set it is I'm just running a straight edge across the top of the cutter like that and bring it down till I've got it pretty much flush, and then I'm winding down. It's around about 13 millimeters, but really it's a matter of a bit of try it and see. As you might just be able to make out, my poor old T-slot cutter has only just made it. The tips of the cutting edges there are looking distinctly rounded, and that's basically because it's been cutting through skin. The skin of the casting has varied from about there up to about there, so it's done a bit of work and it'll be retired honourably, I think. Perhaps try and resharpen it, but we'll see how we go with that. This is very fine cast iron dust, or fine-ish cast iron dust, and I've been carefully collecting that because if I have any voids in the casting, one way of just covering that up cosmetically is to mix that up with a bit of epoxy glue, araldite, something like that, and then put that in there as a paste, and then you can sand that back, and if you get a decent amount of cast iron dust in there, it comes out looking very similar to the cast iron. Some people might be asking at the moment, well, what's so special about these things that you spend all this time making them? And it's basically the angles that you can get. So that one there is 75 or 15 from vertical. This one here is 60 or 30 from vertical. If I flip that over there, I get 45. They're the simple angles. So this one is 15 degrees off horizontal or 75 off vertical. And that one, my bigger set, is 30 degrees. Now the other thing with these is that if you then which way round does it go? That way. If you match them up, of course, you've got 0 on top, and if you've machined them square, you've got 90 degrees there, although if you've used angle plates to machine them, you've got 90 degrees anyway. So you've got every angle in 15-degree increments that you can do with these things. So it makes it much easier if you have to put a chamfer or a 60-degree face on something, rather than setting up sign plates or all that sort of stuff. You can just bolt these down and off you go. The other interesting thing too, I'm going to put some 3/8 holes in these things so that I can use my tie down set on them. But those slots can hold this to the T-slots of my table. Now, originally I was only going to go in a little bit, just enough to clear the nut, but then I realised that if I went in a little bit more, I can actually bolt this on this way. Now, once I've got my T-slot nuts in there, T-slot threads in there, I can actually do compounds, because I can attach like so. I could mark out all my hole positions with the DRO on the mill, or if I had a CNC, I could even use CNC to do it, although CNC you wouldn't need anything like this, I guess. The ones here are relatively straightforward. You put your surface down, mark out. I've put a bit of text on the top there just to remind me which surface I didn't mark from. The horizontal ones across here are a little trickier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my height gauge here, bring it down to the top of my cutout and zero it. In this case I'm just turning it off. Bring it up to the top here, and that's about the top. That's 13.74. That's where I have a calculator in the shed. 7.6 divided by 2, 6.87. Bring that down to 6.87. Okay, 6.87, so that's the midpoint of the hole there, and I can just come across and do that. And I've got them both lined up because they're both same angle. I'm going to repeat that on all three sides, and then I'll come along, put a centre pop in there and use some dividers to space out the next point here, get a square on that same edge that I used for marking out, run that across, similarly down here, run that across. And that will give me the spacing I need. These holes don't have to be exactly in the right spot. They need to be close enough, but they don't have to be exactly the right spot, because all they're doing is holding clamps. I'm about to start drilling my tapping drill holes. In here I've gone through, as you saw, and centre drilled each one just to give the drill something to start on. It's a stub series drill. Don't expect any problems. I've put an angle plate here just to give me a little bit of support. So if this does grab, I haven't got a casting which is shooting across the workshop. It'd be nice to clamp it down, but there really isn't a good spot to clamp. I'm up to the final part now, which is basically tapping all my hold down points. I do have a tapping head, and probably on the larger one I'll set that up and use that for at least for some of the open holes. The blind holes I still get a bit nervous with tapping heads. I could make up a tapping block for this, but this goes along with a lot of other things that I see as, well, not poor practice, but cheating a little bit in the workshop. Making up a tapping block is fine, except that one day you're going to be stuck somewhere without a tapping block and you won't know what to do because you haven't practiced. The way I do this is I actually just use a steel rule, and so what I'll do is I'll start my tap off just very lightly and then put my steel rule up on either side and check that the shank of the tap and the steel rule are parallel. Okay, and this needs to come that way just a smidge. It doesn't take much to push a tap over. You've got to be careful you're not too heavy-handed. But with a tap wrench like this, it's quite long, and so if you're not applying even force to each end of it, you can end up by pulling the tap out. So usually I'll get my tap in there, check the squareness, and then very carefully do the tapping thing. And for those wondering, well, that's really nice, you've made up some shaped blocks, but what are they good for? This is what the sort of thing that they were envisaged for. This is the leaf I made up for my bender, featured in a couple of videos ago, making closed sections. I wanted to take a couple of millimeters off that, and so these blocks hold it at 45 degrees. I've used my 1, 2, 3 blocks just as a stop. A couple of bits of packing here just to make sure I'm clamping on the thing rather than on the 1, 2, 3 block, and it holds it beautifully. I've got a 45 degree angle there, just what I wanted. So thanks for watching. I hope this inspires a few people, and we'll see you for the next one.